Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of their latest films and insights into the craft of directing. Please take a second to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. This episode features directors Anthony and Joe Russo discussing the latest installment in the Marvel franchise, Avengers Endgame. The film takes place directly after the events of the previous film, Avengers Infinity War, and follows the superhero team and their allies as they assemble one final time to undo Thanos' destruction and restore their devastated universe. In addition to Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War, the Russo brothers' directorial credits include the feature films Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Captain America: Civil War, You, Me, and Dupree, Welcome to Collinwood, and Pieces, the movies for television The Council of Dads and Courtroom K, the pilot for the series Lucky, and the pilots and episodes of the series Community and Arrested Development. Following a recent screening of the film at the Harmony Gold Theater in Los Angeles, the Russo brothers spoke with director Todd Holland about filming Avengers Endgame. During their conversation, they discussed their love of subverting genre, the crucial task of balancing tone, and the unique opportunities for emotional payoff created by the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Please note that this is a spoiler-filled discussion.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Sitting through that on a Sunday, on a very nice Sunday.
I was telling the guys just how moving and amazing it was just backstage just now. And I gotta say, the one thing that struck me in the 22 movies in 11 years of this segment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is how you've brought the world into inclusion in the superhero world. You've been a part of that whole thing. You had a scene in, was it Infinity War, where the women, where the women fight, they protect, and then you escalated this in this movie.
Right. Yep.
I think it's just amazing how you, Marvel as a company, and you guys as directors have managed to keep pace with the world.
Absolutely. I think the thing we're most proud of with Marvel moving forward is how inclusive it is. And there's a lot of stuff that we know about that's coming that, hasn't been announced yet, that's going to be, I think, very, very, very exciting for people all over the world. These are global stories, and everyone has the right to see themselves represented on screen.
And I also think, right from the get-go, like from our first Marvel movie with Winter Soldier, traveling the world with that film, and especially seeing how that movie plays to audiences in developing countries, you realize, the world is bigger than the United States and Europe, and there are a lot of places in the world where there are things that we all take for granted that are the furthest thing from a given. So there are ideas in these movies that are critically important, not to just the audiences here, but audiences the world over that means something to them, and that it's a great reminder when you're telling a story that is global.
And just inspiring people to see themselves on screen as superheroes and dream. If you don't know, Anthony and Joe come from a very diverse background. There's a great interview in DGA Quarterly this cycle. It's the current issue, so pick it up or look at it in your magazine bin at home if you have it. But they started independent film, moved into television. We were together in television for a decade, and then transitioned into the Marvel universe and back into film. And what I said to them, 22 movies in 11 years, you finally have a full season.
Which is awesome. Which, by the way, that was the first time that observation had been made, which is perfect. Yeah.
I said, so it's great. They have it around the world doing press, and no one's ever noticed that. But to me, I really want to. I'm so impressed with all 4 of your films in the balance of intimacy and spectacle. And I always feel the television director in you guys hanging on to the characters so intimately and tracking the personal. Because in television, whenever feature directors come into my office and they pitch stuff, they always pitch story, and I go, no. TV is character. And, I feel like you've managed to do that and bring in the massive stories, but you've kept the characters so vivid and protected and so fulfilling.
Well, it's a great point. I mean, look at the end of the day, this is a very specific genre. And while Joe and I, a lot of our approach to these films and to our filmmaking in general has been to be subversive and to find ways to sort of re-examine genre and undermine genre. At the end of the day, these are genre films. So there's going to be a fight. The movie's going to climax in a battle. You know what I mean? So you know these things going into the film. It's a genre film. But what you don't know is what you're talking about, which is the nuances of character that we're going to play with along the way and explore along the way. That's where the movie becomes fresh and unpredictable. And that's of course that's what we lean on in terms of what we can bring to the table directorially.
And movies of this scale, I think, are best serviced in balance. I think the one thing that I don't think we talk about enough as directors, all of us, is that to help each other out is I think the key ingredient to success as a director is tone. And I think, if you want to get great performances, you can go study with an acting coach and learn how to talk to actors in their language. If you want to learn structure, you can read any number of screenplay books. Tone is not something that you can learn or be taught. It's something that you have to gain through execution. And I think ultimately what we're talking about is tonal balance, right? We're trying to balance these things tonally because your mind will only receive so much spectacle. 30 seconds of spectacle that is not either moving a character forward or moving the story forward, your brain shuts off. It can't handle just, a juxtaposition of inconsequential images for beyond more than 30 seconds. So for us, it is the thing that we care about and why we get out of bed every day to make these movies is the tone and figuring out with each one of them, how do you thread the needle of tone in a way that balances the movie correctly?
Well, there's two aspects to tone in this case, which is one is the intimacy and the relationship of character, and the other one is comedy and the humor you bring into situation. It's constant. So I found it was interesting. I watched all your movies again with our 9-year-old son hanging over my shoulder. But it's interesting. I felt like Civil War is. I mean, in all your movies, including this one, you constantly break the action down into these sequence of two-hander scenes. You figure out who to put together. It's 2 or 3, but it's always these 2 and 2 and 3, and then sometimes 4 for a while. But I thought Infinity War was more of a group movie. Just looking at it, quickly, I thought, but all of them, you managed to find the intimacy by working to define the relationships in a series of two-handers where we get to experience these characters we love with fresh insight. Is that something you do in script? You break it down into small bites?
Yeah, I think one of the real thrills of making these movies for us, Joe and I have always loved ensemble storytelling. And if you look at our early work, like our very first work as filmmakers, when we were doing very small independent movies, there were always ensemble pictures. And then we moved into television, which was, especially comedy, which was when we got to work with great ensembles. Like we've always been very steeped in ensemble storytelling. Now, flash forward, Winter Soldier was a bit of ensemble. It had maybe 4 lead characters, which is sort of like a normal small ensemble. But when we moved on to Civil War, we were dealing with a number of characters that we had never encountered before in a feature film. And so Joe and I, we were having trouble on a structural level when working with the writers Marcus and McFeely. How do you actually structure a narrative for that many characters? It's really difficult. So,
So we ripped off the Towering Inferno.
And then it's a mad world. And no. But that's it. We the number of movies that you can count that have ensembles that large are like 2 or 3. So, and they're not really that reliable in terms of what we were doing. So part of the fun, part of the thrilling thing was realizing, oh my God, we don't have a model to rely upon with working with an ensemble this large. We have to sort of make it all up and figure it out as we go. And I think part of the way we made that process manageable on a dramatic level was what you're talking about now, which is sort of finding a way to reduce it to sort of manageable scenes where you can actually have people interacting with one another on a substantive level, and then thinking about how do we break up the larger arcing narrative in a way that supports that.
Because you can't throw all the characters on a bus and drive them through every scene and have anything stick to the ribs. There's no.
But people try.
You can try. You can try, exactly, and I think it's like if more than so we're talking about the rules of like spectacle, more than 30 seconds, you can't contain it in your brain. more than 3 people in a scene like this with the spectacle and everything that's going on, and it's just impossible to create any sense of identity.
It's funny, I was just watching Civil War, which I had a question about why Civil War is not an Avengers movie, since it has almost everybody. Is there a reason why it's a Captain America movie?
It's told from his point of view.
It
begins with him, it ends with him.
And it's arguably the way you segue from the very personal sort of story of Cap, who is arguably one of the co-leads of the Avengers, along with Tony Stark, and in terms of understanding how his very specific individual story segues into the larger narrative that tears the Avengers
It's another
apart.
good question, because that's about point of view, and point of view is also really important in these movies. Whose point of view are you telling the story through? Captain America: Civil War is told from his point of view, and then
Infinity War.
Infinity War is told from Thanos' point of view. So we try to each time out get really specific, make choices that are going to be unique, perhaps catch you off guard or surprise you. And then this one is told from the point of view of the original Avengers. This is their story. It's wrapping up their story.
Tony Stark, from
Right.
I mean, in the book ending sense.
Right.
And then the other part of tone is humor. And I was asking them, like, do the actors understand, like, these? I am so thrilled with these wrenching turns, being deep emotion and then humor, and I find it so real and living. It's why I love comedy, because when you can do this, but most of television world is terrified of this tone because they don't understand when they read it how to make sense of the joke after the cry, in quite this way. But I mentioned the scene where Hulk is coming to rescue or to revive Thor from his sea cottage, and he mentions Thanos, and Thor has this deep emotional turn that I didn't know if you wrote that, how that's written on the page, that the actor would know this breaks what's come before, this is deeply felt, and then there's a joke to get us out of it.
Well, it's us walking them through it. Our process in the script room, again, another I think secret in a movie of this scale is that everything on the page has to be so specific to what you want, because there are thousands of people involved with the production, and they all need to understand what it is that you're thinking. The easiest way to communicate that is in the script. So we spend months in a room with Marcus and McFeely, who write these together, talking through the story, breaking the story together. They'll just appear and do outlines, and then I'll talk about the outlines for another few weeks, and then we go to script phase, and then once we get to a structural place that we're happy with, we understand tone, we understand point of view, we then go through and just do a draft where we sit in the room, all of us, put it on a screen. Again, this is what we've taken from television. We do a room with the 4 of us, and we just go line by line, and we say, this is what we're looking for from the actor here, this is what we want to communicate to the crew here, this is what we need from special effects here. And so everything just it gets put down on the page as a master document for everyone to understand what it is we're trying to accomplish with each scene. That includes moments like that where we think through, just on a tonal level, we like absurdity. We like, pathos and humor being smashed together. So if you're going to take a character like that, and he has this sort of, absurd opening where he's screaming at a kid on the internet playing Fortnite, and then suddenly he gets locked in almost in a PTSD way to the trauma. This guy's he's suffered like a Shakespearean amount of tragedy. He's lost his mother got killed, his father got killed, his brother got killed, his best friend got killed. Planet got destroyed. He lost half of the Asgardians, and he's failed at being a king. So this is a guy who has deep emotional trauma inside of him. And if you can, we tend to find that audiences respond better emotionally if they're laughing. If they become more emotionally available to you, if you can make them laugh and then give them sadness, versus just giving them, shoving sadness down their throats relentlessly.
Well, it's interesting too, like how you layer the scenes sequentially. And I can't remember the exact pattern, but I remember it was a deeply emotional scene, and then you cut to Thor walking out with his. You had big music, his sunglasses, his beard, and he's walking out to the time machine. But you couldn't put 2 emotional scenes back to back. You're riding this roller coaster of letting us enjoy and making us feel, and that's what makes this movie so satisfying.
Well, we love that. I mean, we love movies that give you a really wide range of experience that take you through all the emotions you can possibly have, like make you laugh, make you cry, make you think, make you afraid, make you thrill you, excite you, etc. Like we love as we move through the process, we think it's very exciting and fun to be constantly shifting gears back and forth where you don't know what to expect and you're just being jammed through the most unexpected corridor you can possibly imagine. But I think to your point, that it's difficult to translate on the page, and it is a hard, very hard idea. And it's until you said that, I hadn't really thought about it. But like, yeah, if I go back to Winter Soldier, I think in Winter Soldier we didn't do as much of that. But I think there's a reason why in Endgame, as our last film with Marvel after 4 films in 7 years, we were able to do that perhaps at a more sophisticated level because we had that level of trust with the actors, with the producers, with the studio, etc. So we were able to sort of heat things up in a way that might have been harder to translate.
Like politically,
or
you were able to do it. Was you weren't like over manipulating through script. You were providing, the actors didn't take offense, is what you're saying. When
exactly, and everybody would buy. Everyone would take it on a flyer more. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like if it wasn't quite on the page, they weren't like, "I don't get it. Pull the ripcord and stop the train." They'd be like, "I don't get it. Tell me what I'm supposed to be doing here." You know what I mean? It's a different relationship.
I think the ongoing, the way you call back, again, the time travel thing is a brilliant way to go back to two-handers, to go back to intimacy in the scale versus spectacle, because it's big, the time travel thing, but every single story gets intimate, and you do it so brilliantly, the writers, and you do it so brilliantly at every turn, when it's just a small thing, but at the very end, when Rory says on your left, or not Rory, it's Falcon. Falcon says on your left, Eddie. I went, oh my God, because I just watched Winter Soldier like last night, and I got a little tear, because it was so satisfying.
Well, this is a narrative experiment. It's a mosaic that's taken place over 11 years. Yeah. So you're rewarded to an extent for having seen the other films and having intimate knowledge of the story up till this point. Obviously, I think, this one's probably much harder than some of the other ones. You can jump into quite a few of them at any point that you want to. This one pays off, 21 movies, so I think it's a little more difficult in that regard. But that is the intent, is that, you're paying forward, you're paying backward. And, what's unique about this, and I think that this is, a conversation he and I have all the time, and this is the way that we think about these movies, and you have to not only be a director, but you have to understand pop culture. You have to look at the trends. You have to understand how people are receiving narrative. There's a lot of things you have to do when you're working on a movie of this scale in order for it to translate globally. And one of those things is trying to understand how narrative is working in today's world. And what I think it is, and the sort of thesis that we've been operating off of for 7 years is, that people want serialized storytelling because they crave an emotional connection that has longevity, versus it's much harder to generate that same kind of emotional response that we're getting to some of the bigger emotional moments in this movie in 2 hours. It's very hard. It's just math. If you've got 2 hours of storytelling time and a character suffers a terrible fate an hour in, you can have a certain emotional response depending on how good you did in that first hour with that character. But if that character suffers that same emotional fate after 22 films, it can be devastating. It's much more traumatic. And I just think that it's a combination of Marvel, it's a combination of Netflix and OTT platforms. But I think that we're working towards long-form narrative in a way, moving forward as being the dominant form of narrative.
I totally agree. When I saw the poster for King Arthur, it was a movie. I didn't realize that. And I saw the poster for King Arthur, and I was like, oh. And then I saw it was a movie that had failed. I went, that was a movie? I thought that would have made a great long form. You want longer narratives because you have time to invest.
Exactly. Yeah. You can tell better stories with the characters. You can, and again, this isn't a qualitative sort of examination of the two. You can do incredible work in either. I just think that the younger generation, this generation coming up, and I got 4 kids that are between the age of 13 and 21, watching their viewing habits. Their viewing habits are about connectivity and longevity. and I don't think that's going anywhere.
So, and how does this closing book of Phase 3 of the Marvel? How do you? There must be a web of connections that are connected the next generation of films to the same viewers.
With Marvel.
Yeah, Marvel. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, the one of the real creative upsides of this movie of Endgame for Joe and I was that the goal for us was to tell the most satisfying ending to the 11 years and the 22 movies that we could possibly tell. So for the first time, we weren't thinking forward, which was an amazing thing, because we were like, our job was simply to look backwards, to think about these characters, the roads that they've traveled, and figure out how do we bring each one of them to the most satisfying and unexpected and surprising conclusion that we could. So we weren't thinking about the future. Now there certainly is a future to the MCU, but and Joe and I have been involved in that since we started with Winter Soldier. But I think one of the great things about the work that we were able to contribute to this movie is that I think we got to places on this movie. And again, this is a credit to Kevin Feige as a producer, who's the greatest producer we've ever worked with. His discipline and his focus was to allow us on this movie to not think about the future at all and to be simply focused on concluding the story. So we haven't done a ton. There's a lot of thought been put into the future of the MCU, but it hasn't been driven by Joe and I.
It's a bummer to think. I mean, it's like the ending of Harry Potter, kind of. It's like this whole world you become accustomed to, and Iron Man and Captain America. It's a real disappointing that they're gone, and there'll be some new form of them. But it's a generational passing.
It is, and that's part of it. I think that you can't, there's nothing has value unless it has an ending, right? So even in serialized storytelling, at some point, you have to get to an ending, and endings are usually the best part of any story, or that's the hope, right?
Beginnings.
Yep, or beginnings. But it's, you want that ending to be inspiring. You want that ending to be impactful on you, and worthy of the entire story that you've invested in. So that's what I think is unique about this movie, is that it actually does get to end.
Was there ever? Is this always the way it ended? Was there ever? Do you have to rethink anything? Was this?
No, about 3 years ago, we came up with the ending of this movie. Before we had to write both of these scripts at the same time, and we needed to know what happened at the end of this one, obviously, in order to write both scripts. For Marcus McFeel to write both scripts, you have to know where you're going, because then everything is about paying off the ending. If you watch the film and you go look at Tony Stark's arc, everything in it is about maximum impact for him. And I know some people are recording, so maybe. Let people know there's spoilers if you're going to post this stuff. But, everything is about maximum impact for Tony dying at the end of the movie. At the beginning of the film, he comes home and sort of has an emotional reckoning with Cap. He's got this incredible amount of guilt that he's feeling. Then you cut to him 5 years later. He now has a daughter, which has always been a difficult thing for him to do, which is settle down and give emotional time to his wife and his family. He's put Iron Man aside. They come asking. He rejects it because he says, the last thing I want to do is start messing with time and lose the thing that I now love most, which is my daughter. And then, of course, by the end of the film, the thing that he has to sacrifice is his connection with his daughter. So only in knowing where you're going, and this is set up in Infinity War 2 if you go back and look at it, only in knowing where you're going can you then hit the correct storytelling beats to get you there with maximum impact.
Yeah. But that being said, there was a lot of, even though we spent a long time figuring out the endpoint for the major characters and we knew what we wanted those endpoints to be, part of our process is we love experimentation. So as far as the road that we got to those endpoints throughout Infinity War and Endgame, there was a lot of experimentation. And that's always been a critical part of our process, not only at the script phase, but when we're shooting and in post-production. We love trying different ideas.
So loss is a huge theme in this movie, and so do you feel like, had you gotten an origin story in phase one, it would have been you had the benefit of leaning into this journey that these characters have been on for 11 years. And it charged everything. The emotionality you're able to find in both these last two movies is profound. So you think, is that? I'm sort of talking about the serialized aspect of it all. Would you have how different would it have been if you would have been originating characters in phase one?
Well, it's a great question because again, and this speaks to sort of like the specificity of what the MCU is and the sort of wonderful opportunities in serialized storytelling. Because I think, Joe and I got to join the MCU at I think what like the ideal time for our sensibilities were. Like Joe and I are big into deconstruction. We like to tear things down, we like to tear things apart, we like to subvert things. So, when we got hired by Marvel to start developing the Winter Soldier just before the first Avenger movie came out. So just before the series was established as the sort of powerful, wonderful thing that it is, we came on to then, so we get to enter the narrative at that point, and we get to go, okay, well, now that you've built up this like amazing thing, let's figure out how to tear it down. Like that's our job. How do we sort of tear down? How do we tear apart Captain America? And then how do we tear apart the event? Like, how do we tear apart Captain America? That is exactly what the Winter Soldier is. How do you get Captain America to lie to his superiors? How do you get Captain America to realize that the cause that he's serving is corrupt? In Civil War, it's how do you tear apart the Avengers? How do you divorce this family? How do you destroy the relationship between Tony and Steve? And then moving on to Infinity War, oh, guess what, guys? The bad guy wins. That happens in life. So it's like the whole road that we got to travel through the MCU was basically what plays to our taste and instincts as storytellers. Like the strongest part, I think, of us that we have to offer creatively. So it was weird because I don't know if we had entered, I don't know that we would have built the series up as well as if had we entered at the beginning. We just got really lucky to enter when we did. We got lucky that you entered when you did, because it's the emotionality of that makes these movies so satisfying. I mean, and I always think I think Winter Soldier was like 2.5 hours long, 2.5 hours long, and I thought it's the extra half hour where you spend just on his anguish as a black and white man in a gray world. That made it so satisfying. That was what was interesting, is the extra time you're able to spend in script and on screen, dealing with the nuances of life in the modern world. It's fascinating to hear you say that, because like those are the parts of the movies that we cherish the most as well. And like, as you would expect, for as wonderful as Marvel is and wonderful as Disney is, those are always the parts of the movies that we get challenged the most on. And those are the hardest for us to sort of defend. But we also believe in those as critical aspects to the experience.
What were your hardest movies in this one to defend?
Well, I think earlier in the film, we
maybe the whole 20-minute movie that ends in failure, and then the 5 years later. I mean, I was like, that's the whole genius right there. Yeah. 20 minutes in, you're like 5 minutes in, you're doing it, and then it all hits rock bottom, and it's 5 years later, and everybody's
that's playing with expectation, right? As you're going to walk into the theater and assume, this is sort of
such a quick start,
linear adventure movie as these guys all band together to go find Thanos, get the gauntlet back. Well, what if 20 minutes in that ends in failure, and where does the movie go from there? That's the most compelling thing. We like writing ourselves into a corner, and I think. Breaking Bad is probably one of our favorite pieces of entertainment in the last 40 years, because it consistently ends in a corner, and you just have no idea in the next episode how they're going to get out. And it's fascinating to watch, and it's thrilling to watch. And so we similarly try to constantly put ourselves in corners here, where the audience would have to go on journeys with us and be surprised.
So is there a Russo method when you first get something, the way you two look at something, or the filters you put it through? I mean, it's different, I guess, if you're developing it with writers from scratch. That's a different set of filters. If somebody hands you something, I mean, what does it need to have to be something that you guys relate to?
It's a good question. I mean, look, one thing that I've been grateful about in terms of the road that Joe and I have been able to travel is, like, we have very eclectic tastes. And we like to be surprised. And so we've been very fortunate that, like, if you look at our career, like, we've made movies for as little money as you could possibly make a movie for, and now we've made movies for as much money as you could possibly make a movie for. We've made comedies in television. We made dramas. We've worked on cable, network, etc. We shoot commercials. We sort of love the entire variety that you can find in terms of what you can do as a filmmaker with cinema. So it's hard, like on one level, it's hard for me to say what we respond to, just because we like to be challenged and we like to be pushed into places that feel unfamiliar to us. We light up the most when we're scared. So it's nice to get into those places.
So you're going small now? What do you do after this?
We're definitely going small.
We are
You're definitely going small?
Point the camera at two people talking for a little while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there any part where I'm being asked to wrap up? Is there any part of this movie you watched that bugs you? You wish you could have been better? The piece you go, I wish that would have been different. Or do you just get to go back and redo it if that's the case?
I don't know. Can you think of anything?
I don't know. I would say this. I would say until about our fourth, we do these things called friends and family screenings, as opposed to calling them test screenings at Marvel. And like part of the reason I think that we call them that is because there's such a high level of secrecy with these movies. It's really important that whoever you show the movie to doesn't talk about it. So there's this process that we've developed where we have these test screenings where like people who are connected to Disney can be invited. But you can't to the screening, but you can't work in the film business, but you have to have a strong connection to you have to be invited by somebody at Disney, which of course means that like if you say anything, your loved one who invited you will be fired, right? So it's very controlled, So I think it was till about the fourth test screening that we had, friends and family screening, that I was totally sick over the movie. I was just scared to death. I was like, it's a disaster. But then it just turns the corner for some reason. I don't know. A movie like this is so big and so complex, and it's made up of so many like micro beats that it's hard to say. Like I don't know. I don't think like Joe. I don't think I have the thing.
You spill 1,000 marbles on a table, and then you slowly have to just do this over 2 years. You're just trying to push
it's like Smart Hulk says to Black Widow when they're about to do the time test. He says, it's time travel. It's either all a joke or none of it is. It's kind of the same thing with the movie.
In closing, I would say two things. One, Smart Hulk is hot. Two, these guys are just done.
Ruffalo know.
Yeah.
We'll let Mark Ruffalo know that.
Yeah, no, Smart Hulk is super hot.
Agreed.
Anyways, and secondly, these guys have just done like 38 straight days of press, you said, something like that.
38 days of press.
I thank them for coming out for the Guild. They're great Guild members, and let's give them a hand, please.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you're enjoying our show, please take a moment to rate and review us. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow cinephiles find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.